Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. My grandson pushed me into the lake, and laughingly said, "Don't play the victim." So I survived. And I changed everything. My name is Eleanor Williams. I am 72 years old. And what I am going to tell you is not a news story. It is not an exaggeration to attract pity. It is me life. A life that I gave to others. A life full of excellent sacrifices, love offered without expecting anything in return, of pains hidden behind smiles. And then there was that day. The one where everything changed, the one where I stopped being silent. I raised 2 children, Robert, the eldest, and Lindsay, my youngest. We lived in a small town in Vermont, surrounded by pine trees, snow in winter, and neighbors who still greeted you by looking you in the eyes. Their father, James, was my childhood sweetheart, my rock. He was a high school science teacher. A fair, discreet man, passionate about the stars and people. But he died too soon, acute leukemia, diagnosed one autumn morning, as we were preparing to decorate the house for Halloween. 3 months later, he was gone. That I was a widow at 39, with 2 children aged 13 and 7. And more debt than savings. I cried in secret. I collapsed in my bathroom and then went out with red eyes and a wobbly smile to make them pancakes. I had to hold on. For them. For me. For James. I returned to work at Municipal Library. 35 years spent among the shelves, the dog-eared books, the whispering children and the high school students who came to cheat on the computers. It wasn't glorious, but it was honest, stable, useful. It was also a refuge. I loved the calm, the smell of paper, the feeling of passing on knowledge. I gave everything to Robert and Lindsay, every penny. Every minute. Every beat of my heart. That I was there for homework. For romantic disappointments. For colds and dreams. I gave up vacations, shopping for myself, quiet weekends, so they wouldn't want for anything. When he got into university, I sold my mother's jewelry to supplement his expenses. When he got his first job, I cried with pride in my kitchen, alone, with my cup of tea. And then he met Deborah. I was happy. Really. She was beautiful, elegant, brilliant. Coming from a more affluent family, she knew the codes, the fine restaurants, the Cape Cod vacations. She had this way of speaking softly, as if she controlled every syllable, every look, too polite to be sincere. From the beginning, I felt that there was a distance. Not outright hostility. No, something more subtle. Like a glass partition between her and me. She greeted me with perfectly measured smiles, always called me Mrs. Williams, even after the wedding, and changed the subject as soon as I talked too long about Robert as a child. I wasn't mean. Just self-effacing. But I kept quiet. I thought, this is their life now. Don't be that intrusive mother-in-law everyone hates. And then, one day, Ethan was born. Ah, that little one. I remember the first time I held him in my arms. He was tiny, all warm, his fists clenched as if to hold the world in. He opened his eyes and I knew. I knew I would love him as I had loved his father. Maybe even more. He brought me back to life. I babysat him every Wednesday. Then on weekends. Then sometimes for a whole week when Deborah had her lectures, or when Robert was traveling. I sang to him the lullabies my mother sang to me. I cooked his favorite purees. I framed each of his drawings. He called me, darling Nana. And when he would cuddle up to me and say, "I want to sleep at your place," my heart would melt. But over the years, something broke. The curious and cuddly little boy has become a cold, mocking, harsh teenager. He didn't call me Nana anymore, but Eleanor, in a dry tone. He complained about coming to my house. He said it smelled old and that I was overwhelmed. He imitated my voice, my back bent, mocked my expressions. Once, I caught him imitating my gait in front of his cousins, limping exaggeratedly. He laughed out loud. I looked Robert. He was there. He saw. He didn't said nothing. Nothing. Not a word to defend me. Not a frown. He continued to look at his phone as if I had become invisible. That night, I cried in my car. Silently. My hands clenched on the steering wheel. And I understood that my love no longer protected them. It hindered them. The house on the shore of Hartley Lake, it was more than a house. It was a refuge, and living album of memories that I had built with James, my husband. We bought it in the 80s, for almost nothing at the time, a small, half-dilapidated wooden cabin, facing the water, hidden among the pine trees. Little by little, we renovated it together. He sanded, I painted. We picked out every piece of furniture at flea markets, every hand-sewn curtain, every framed photo on the walls. We heard the loons sing at dusk, we roasted marshmallows in the summer, we read there huddled by the fire in the winter. It's where our children learned to swim, where James gave me my last ring for our 25th anniversary. It's where he said his last words. This place was his breath, it was his voice, it was him. That year, in August, I felt a void. Calls were rare. Visits even rarer. Lindsay was in Seattle. Robert, he was texting me quickly. Then I had an idea. What if I gathered the family at the lake, like before? A weekend, just one. To reconnect. To feel like I belonged again. I called Robert. He answered in a distracted tone. I'll talk to Deborah about it. He called me back 2 days later. Okay, let's come. But not for too long, Ethan has a game on Tuesday. I didn't expect a standing ovation. But I would have liked him to seem happy. It doesn't matter. I have cleaned the house from top to bottom. I washed the sheets in lavender, waxed the old furniture, emptied the boat, hung a string of lanterns around the porch, just like before. And I have kitchen. Fresh blueberry pancakes, just like Ethan loved at 6 years old. Spicy chili, simmered for hours. I even bought a new red checkered tablecloth. All that'll please them, to still feel useful, to find my roots as a mother and grandmother. They arrived a Friday late afternoon, in a brand new SUV. The music was blaring. They were laughing loudly. Robert barely kissed me, already distracted by his phone. Deborah got out, sunglasses on, sighing. She handed me a bag. Where's the room furthest from the kitchen? I need silence for my Zoom meetings. Ethan, he looked around as if he had landed in an abandoned fishing hut. Do we really sleep here? It's vintage. I forced myself to laugh. You used to say, magic, when you were little. He gave me a strange look. Yeah, when I was 6. All evening I did my best to ignore the sidelong glances, the heavy silences. Deborah spent her time on her phone, scrolling through Instagram. Robert read emails, answered calls. Ethan made fun of everything. From my tablecloth, it looks like a giant picnic. From my sweater, is it from the Cold War? In my voice, you always talk like in old movies. Each remark cut me a little deeper, like an invisible blade. And Robert said nothing. He even smiled, sometimes. As if it was normal. The Sunday afternoon the sun was at its zenith. A heavy heat hung over the lake. The kind of moment when, in the old days, James and I would go and read in the shade of the old oak tree. Deborah was asleep in a deck chair. Robert had locked himself in the bedroom for a video conference. Ethan approached me as I was watering the geraniums. Come take a walk on the pontoon with me, Nana. I looked up in surprise. It had been a long time since he'd called me that. Of course, I said, with a small smile. We walked in silence, side by side, to the end of the old wooden pontoon. The lake shone, still. A light breeze stirred the leaves. I felt peaceful, almost moved. Then, without warning, Ethan stopped. He turned to face me. His face had changed. His gaze wasted, sarcastic, insensible. And he said to me, "You're still standing, right?" I didn't have time to understand. Nor to react. His two hands pushed me violently. In the stomach. Like a shock. Brutal. Dry. My body tilted backward. The sky spun. The wood of the dock disappeared. And I fell. Splash. The cold hit me immediately. My clothes felt heavy. My head hit something underwater that I panicked. My heart was pounding. I tried to come up. To breathe. But my arms were flailing in the air. I flowed slowly. And then, in the mist of the water, I heard a voice. Blurry. Distant. Distorted by the liquid echo. But I would recognize it among 1,000. That off me grandson. Don't play the victim. He laughed. He laughed. While I was struggling. While I was suffocating. While I am in my eyes. My own grandson laughed. I don't know how long I remained underwater. Time no longer had any unity. It had dissolved into the dull sound of the lake, in the pounding of my heart, in the absolute silence of panic. My arms were flailing in the water, my legs were unresponsive. A sharp pain was shooting through my ribs, and my throat was already burning from lack of air. I wanted to scream. I wanted to leave. But all I felt was the icy weight of betrayal. And then, a silhouette appeared above me. Blurry, moving, haloed with light as in a dream. Arms grabbed me. Strongly. I felt myself being lifted up. I coughed, choked, spat out water. I clung to this presence as to life itself. It was only later that I found out, it was Margaret Connors, a neighbor, also a widow, who was paddling peacefully on the lake in her old yellow canoe. She had seen me fall. She had seen everything. And she had dived in without thinking. When she pulled me onto the bank, I was shaking all over. My hair was sticking to my face. My hands were scratched, my sweater was ripped off. My chest burned with every breath. And my dignity was dripping with every drop of water that fell from my clothes. Ethan remained on the dock. Frozen. He wasn't screaming. He wasn't running. He was looking. Straight ahead, like actor out of his role. Then, finally approaching, he muttered. She tripped. I think. His voice was blank. Empty. As if he didn't realize what had just happened. Or maybe he did, all right, but that he did not feel nothing. Margaret covered me with her towel. I was in shock. I couldn't speak. My fingers were shaking, my teeth were chattering. My own grandson had pushed me into the water to make fun of me. And he hadn't even lifted a finger to save me. A few hours later, I was at the Burlington Hospital, lying on a stretcher, shivering, on an 4-drip, wrapped in thin blankets. The nurses treated me gently. But every movement reawakened the pain in my left side. Cracked ribs. Multiple bruises. Bruises to the back of your neck. You were lucky, Mrs. Williams. At your age, it could have been a lot worse. At your age. These words resonated like a guillotine. Robert arrived in the early evening. He entered the room without a word, his arms crossed, his gaze closed. He didn't run. He didn't ask questions. He didn't take my hand. So, was it an accident? Ethan says you tripped. I looked at him. For a long time. I was searching a crack in that mask of indifference. A tremor in his voice. A tear. A hint of fear. But no. It seemed especially, annoyed, embarrassed, perhaps. As if he feared the scandal, but not the pain that my pain. Then Deborah came in. Dressed impeccably, as always. Subtle lipstick, scarf around her neck, designer bag slung over her shoulder. She gave me a tight smile. We're relieved you're okay. Ethan is upset, you know. Upset? By what? By being seen? By missing his joke? By not drowning me completely? And Ethan? He stayed in the hallway. I caught a glimpse of him. He was looking out the window, his hands in his pockets. He didn't want to come in. He couldn't look me in the face. The next morning, a doctor asked me, "Ms. Williams, you told the admissions office that you slipped. But your neighbor claims to have seen something unusual. Do you want to file a complaint? A report?" My heart sank. It was there. The moment. The threshold. The opportunity to make my voice heard, finally. The truth. Common sense. But I looked out the window. The gray sky. The motionless fir trees. And I said, "No. I just slipped." Why? I asked myself 1,000 times. Out of habit? Out of instinct? Out of shame? Because I was still that woman who protected, no matter what. Because in my heart, somewhere, I still thought that if I reported Ethan, would destroy what remained of me family. But that day, saying this, I betrayed myself one last time. And that was the last time. Back home, the door closed behind me with a dull thud that sounded like a verdict. That day, something inside me broken, a part of me has extinct, cold, disillusioned. This tender, generous woman, ready to do anything for her family, from whom everything had always been asked, to whom everything had been given, she had reached breaking point. But, in this heavy silence, something else began to awaken. Icy glow of lucidity, like a flickering flame in the darkness. An inner voice whispering, "It's time. It's time to protect you, Eleanor." I thought about everything I had done for them. My life savings, every penny carefully saved for their education, for their future. Robert's university, expensive, but I didn't want him to lack anything. The trips back and forth to Boston to see Lindsay. The gifts, the insurance, the doctor's appointments. When they wanted to buy their house, I was the one who put up the deposit, without asking for anything, because I wanted to see them happy and stable. Even the swimming pool, that little luxury they boasted about to their friends, came from my bank account. And them, what had they done for me? What had they done while I was drowning, literally, in pain and indifference? I felt a slow, dull anger building. An anger just unnecessary. An anger that burns, but which illuminates. So, I decided to change things. I made an appointment with Anatary. Sitting across from him in his office, its walls covered in diplomas, I signed papers that would transform my life. The lake house I had loved so much was up for sale. I changed my will, removing Robert and Ethan from all my wishes. I opened a bank account in my own name, a secret refuge where no one could get their hands on it. I even made a substantial donation to Association Locale, which helps elderly women who have been abused or abandoned by their families, like me. And then there was this urgency to speak out. To no longer carry this weight of silence. I went to a community center for senior women. A warm place, where stories are exchanged over cups of coffee and knitted shawls. I told my story, my pain, my betrayal. This is where a woman, the journalist Grace Monroe, approached me. She had listened, her eyes shining with emotion. "Eleanor, your story needs to be heard. People need to know. I want to write an article." I hesitated. Then I accepted. A few days later, the article appeared in the local newspaper, with this headline that chilled me. "My grandson tried to drown me. And no one raised a hand to help me." The impact was immediate. The article was shared thousands of times. It was picked up by national media outlets. Women from all over the country wrote to me, often privately, sometimes publicly. They told me about their own suffering, their own struggles with being forgotten, with family abuse. Some were crying while saying, "Thank you." Some said they felt less alone. Some said that my courage gave them the strength to speak out. And I, for the first time in a long time, no longer felt like a victim. I felt alive. Because by breaking the silence, I had regained control. I had regained my dignity. The publication of the article had the effect of Ashland earthquake, which has spread far beyond our small town. Ethan's high school, a posh private school that relied heavily on its image, was quick to react. The management opened an internal investigation, summoned Ethan, the teachers, the witnesses. The testimony of Margaret Connors was retained. Social networks had already taken up the matter, some young students shared the article with shocked comments. And then Ethan's football scholarship was suspended. Without the school's financial support, his chances of getting into a university with an athletic program had vanished. So had his reputation. People no longer smiled at him in the hallways. They stared at him. They whispered. Some avoided him. Others confronted him. Robert, meanwhile, received 2 official termination letters. 2 companies he had worked with for years. They cited loss of trust, brand image. People around him no longer dared to associate their name with that of a man whose mother told such a story. Deborah She kept a low profile. But it wasn't enough. At the law firm where she worked, tensions rose. An influential client threatened to leave. The firm asked her to take temporary leave, which turned into discreet departure, a few weeks later. And then one day, they called me. Robert, first. He left a message on my answering machine. Mom, we need to talk to you. Things have gotten out of hand. We need to talk. Then Deborah. Her honeyed, strained voice. Eleanor, what you did, it was violent. But maybe we could sit down. Find some common ground. Finally, Ethan. The shortest. I'm sorry, okay? I didn't mean all of this. But he was too late. Too late for crocodile tears. Too late for fear of consequences. Too late for apologies dictated by public shame, not sincere remorse. I didn't answer. Not out of revenge. No. But because I had understood, finally, that my silence was worth more than their empty words. Today I live in a small apartment in the city, modest but warm. A place of my own, without imposed memories, without obligations. The walls are covered with books, photos of women I met in my workshops. I hung a frame on the wall with these embroidered words. She drowned one day, but she learned to swim. Gives reading lessons in a primary school, to children in difficulty. When I see the spark of understanding in their eyes, I feel useful, deeply. I am transmitting something true. Co-hosts speaking circles in a community center for older women. We share our stories, our pain, our silences, our victories. Every week, a new voice rises. And I say to myself, that's why I'm still standing. I'm no longer Robert's mother. I'm no longer Ethan's grandmother. I am Eleanor Williams. They pushed me into the water. They thought I would sink. But I am racing to the surface, out of breath, lungs full of water and heart in pieces. And since then, swimming against the current, sometimes alone, sometimes tired, but free. I didn't drown in their silence. I made one voice a voice that tells. A voice that heals. And this voice, now, no one can silence her anymore.